There's an old saying, "With every gift there comes an equal or greater curse." Restated, it means with every privilege given there comes a greater responsibility to make sure no one gets hurt by it. Here's another observation before we get started. America's childish leadership have found the box of matches and finally figured out how to set all the houses on fire and leave the trees untouched. However, still no word on how many residents got out alive or were completely cremated while they slept. But to blame this incineration/cremation event on elements within the American government is not the best explanation of this. A better way to analyze this is to consider the military significance of this operation. Therefore, what you are really seeing is some sort of demonstration, reminder, and message to certain leaders within the American government from some unseen, unnamed, foreign enemy that the leadership must not forget who and what they are dealing with. The fire-breathing dragon drones of the ancient past are back, and they're just getting started. Now let's take a closer look at the Las Vegas shooter, Stephen Paddock, and a few of his spin-offs. To the average cops out there who are trying to do their best under present circumstances, we here at Pop Zero News Network understand your dilemma. These faces and the employers they work for are way above your pay grade. So what was Paddock's role and motive in all of this? Paddock's motive is clear. It was money. And lots of it. The amount of money involved here means Paddock was working for someone. His cover as a gambler simply makes it easy to launder large sums of illicitly acquired cash. So unless he was also scamming and robbing the Vegas casinos for millions of dollars for years, he would have had to be the luckiest professional gambler out there. So who really was Stephen Paddock? And who were his employers? And what were their motives for using Paddock as a patsy? As usual, the answer is right in front of you, but you will never see it without understanding the larger context, and how all of these events are connected, and why they will not end anytime soon. Ultimately, it requires a greater understanding of the military significance of these events. The first military rule is no nation will willingly volunteer to destroy itself as a favor or gift to its enemies. Therefore, the enemy must find a way to defeat its adversary, overtly or covertly. What you are seeing play out in Las Vegas is a covert enforcement operation. I will leave it to you for now to figure out what's being enforced, but it will be explained later in this report. The Pentagon strike on 9/11 symbolizes the head blow to the U.S. military. And following that, you know what happens to the body next. Good answer. And down goes Frazier. And so goes Frazier, so goes the U.S. military. Soon to be followed by the executive branch, Congress, Senate, governors, and last but not least, the local sheriffs, police, and security forces. Will everyone surrender quietly? Of course not. You can expect there will be pockets of localized resistance to what feels like surrender, and direct orders to stand down, to not interfere, to not intervene, to holster and to lay down their weapons. And with the lives of their family members on the line, yes, they will comply. Other aspects of these operations which must not be overlooked are operational costs, management, control and risks. The more horrific the event, the more people affected, the more casualties and victims, the more costly and riskier the event becomes. The cost of the Las Vegas mass shooting required large sums of cash, new homes being purchased with cash, and huge stockpiles of guns, ammo, explosives and technical gear. But what about risk? Risk is another cost that has to be minimized and controlled. The costs associated with risk are insurance coverage, victims' claims, lawsuits and increases in premiums. This is why these events sometimes have aspects of being staged and at other times aspects of being completely real. Depending on the objective and what's considered a reasonable risk cost, the event will be either all staged, all real, or some kind of hybrid. If actors are used, they must sign waivers, so there will be little in the way of very large claims whenever they're involved. In the Las Vegas shooting, the shooter shot from one property insured by Mandalay Bay, at victims on another property insured by event promoters. But who is liable for injuries, victims, and casualties that occur outside of these properties, or away from the primary locations, in this instance, the concert venue, and the Mandalay Bay? But it's not so much the risk of lawsuits and settlements that must be avoided. It's the courts. The evidence, testimony, witnesses, timeline, medical personnel, sheriff, security, cops, FBI, and the official lone gunman theory must never come under courtroom scrutiny and cross-examination. Case closed. No grand jury. No judge. No trial. No prosecution. No defense. No verdict. Then there's this question. When did the FBI, Homeland Security, and the assortment of other federal officials become first responders in all of these events? It seems that no matter how remote, isolated and distant the crime scene, the FBI gets to the location with all their crime scene investigation resources before or at the same time the local police arrive. How is this possible? Who called the feds? When were the feds called? How did the local sheriff know so soon that federal laws were violated? What makes these crimes a federal crime scene? Why is it so important that these crime investigations not be left to local sheriff's departments? If these events are random, then how do the feds have such accurate foreknowledge to mobilize a large team of investigators on such short notice? How is it that before the body of the shooter and his victims go cold, and before the crime scene tape is put in place, the FBI knows with absolute certainty that a lone gunman was involved? Such speed by the FBI to be on the scene so quickly is the most obvious and glaring sign of FBI collusion and guilt. What the FBI fears is that the local sheriff's department will come into possession and control of evidence, testimony, dead witnesses, casualties, victims, paid actors, federal informants, agents, the patsy, his property, and his illicit assets before they themselves take control. Therefore, the feds immediately show up to lock out the local authorities, and order the sheriff and police departments to stick to the lone gunman cover story, stand down, and refrain from intervening, or interfering with the surrender enforcement operation being run by America's unseen, unnamed, foreign enemy. Questions like these raise serious concerns that the U.S. no longer has a legitimate constitutional court system, or a judicial system of due process anymore. Any cases that make it before a judge or jury will most likely be kangaroo courts, where the judge, prosecution, and defense are all imposters working together for a common outcome. But then, why bother with courts, judges, and juries at all, when you can simply replace them with a single supreme, all-knowing, affordable, speedy justice department like the FBI? The next question is, why are these locations chosen? Why were Las Vegas and the other locations chosen for these kinds of operations? The locations are not random. What is random is the detection of potential pockets of local organized resistance, or coordinated threats to the ongoing takedown and takeover of an already defeated America coming from these areas, or from within the local law enforcement departments. So, in order to neutralize and eliminate these threats, The unseen, unnamed, foreign enemy creates an event that will force an occupation and takeover of the local law enforcement and security forces. Any targets identified as a potential threat will be removed or replaced at this time. This is what makes these events militarily significant. The lone gunman story is designed to be an unsolvable puzzle, full of distractions, misdirections, baited traps, and leads that force us to chase the ghosts of the patsy, multiple shooters, actors, and other phantoms while totally missing the military significance of the operation. Is this also a case of privilege gone wild? America's dirty little secret. Let's start with this headline. Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock gambled with at least $160,000 in recent weeks. Mandalay Bay shooter Stephen Paddock gambled with at least $160,000 in the past several weeks at Las Vegas casinos, according to senior law enforcement officials. There were 16 currency transaction reports, or CTRs, filed for Paddock in recent weeks. The Treasury Department and the IRS mandate that casinos file the reports for each transaction in currency involving cash-in and cash-out of more than $10,000 in a gaming day. The reports don't show whether Paddock won or lost, or both on the days in question. They do show that on same days there were multiple transactions. A source familiar with the investigation told NBC News that Paddock was a frequent player with the highest status at Caesars Entertainment Properties in Las Vegas. When they're not destroying lives by pulling triggers, they're destroying lives by pulling massive scams. According to the company's website, the top level for gamblers is 7 stars, tier status, which is by invitation only, and subject to alteration or cancellation. Privileges include comped rooms, room upgrades, player credits, and access to signature experiences. Paddock lost a slip-and-fall lawsuit against another Vegas casino, the Cosmopolitan Hotel. He still owed $270 in court fees when he killed himself and 58 other people Sunday. Authorities said Tuesday night that the widely reported number of 59 deaths includes the gunman. Security video from the Cosmopolitan Hotel shows Paddock slipping and falling on October 30, 2011, as he walked from a hotel shop toward a high-stakes area in the casino. Paddock said he had slipped in a puddle of liquid and sued the hotel in 2012, initially asking for $100,000. According to the attorney for the hotel, Marty Kravitz. Paddock reported incurring more than $32,000 in medical bills, and also wanted to be paid for pain and suffering. Security video shows him getting medical attention and then being stretchered out of the casino. They always ask for a lot more than they can get, but he got nothing, Kravitz said. The arbitrator ruled in favor of the casino and dismissed allegations of negligence as without merit. Before these enemies of society committed their horrific acts, they were unnamed, unseen, psychopathic, sociopathic, privileged criminal deviants, and also American. The fact that Paddock tried to scam the Cosmopolitan Hotel out of $100,000 shows that he is not new to petty crimes and other misdeeds. Stop falling for the Boy Scout to ballistic mass murderer fairy tale. Now here's some advice for local sheriffs and cops. Stop being so predictable and reactive in your policing and profiling, and start being more preemptive and proactive. By the time one of these pampered deviants kills someone, it's far too late. The bigger issue is, why did local cops, federal law enforcement, medical professionals, and other officials not tag Paddock years ago? Why did they remain quiet and ignore the signs, flags, tips, violations, and symptoms Paddock occasionally showed. The other problem is, how do you deny privilege, courtesies, liberties to individuals like Paddock, who will later commit crimes destroying hundreds, even thousands of lives by murder, theft, lies, and treason without giving up the precious privileges the silent majority presently enjoy? The answer is, you extend the same police harassment, injustice, and scrutiny to Paddock and his kind that have been perfected over the years targeting blacks and other minorities. So what are the basic rules of law enforcement and justice in America that are keeping this mass murder madness going? 1. In a country of majority privilege, it is far more acceptable to let 10 potential white murderers go free than to wrongly arrest and convict one innocent white man for any crime. Therefore, they are innocent until proven guilty. 2. It is also far more acceptable to wrongly convict and incarcerate 10 innocent black and brown men than to mistakenly let a single guilty one go free. Therefore, they are guilty until proven innocent. These two rules come together to create a complex American judicial paradox. How many innocent white males must be wrongly convicted and their lives destroyed in order to stop 10 probable mass murderers and save the lives of hundreds of potential innocent murder victims? There is no perfect answer, but there is a more righteous and judicial balance, and the commitment to a single standard for all. The adverse effects of tolerating a privileged criminal class. Depopulation versus privilege, treason, high crime, murder, fraud, corruption. In order to understand these mass casualty shootings, you must understand the weaponization of privilege, treason, and high crimes. As long as the privileged criminals and outlaws are allowed to easily evade crime-fighting tools like suspicion, stop and frisk harassment, surveillance, tracking, arrest, incarceration, suspension of civil rights, and economic liberties, these mass casualty events will continue to increase in frequency, horror, and scope. So the question is, how did a 64-year-old psychopath, sociopath, behavioral criminal deviant go undetected for so long, with no criminal record, no suspicion, no profiling, no stop and frisk harassment, no flags, no domestic abuse complaints, no enemies, no counseling, no treatment, no prescriptions, and then wind up committing one of the most heinous mass murders in American history? President Donald Trump says, "We are dealing with a very, very sick individual," and called Paddock a sick man, a demented man. Who else other than a lifelong criminal deviant would be completely comfortable driving hundreds of miles in a car filled with an assortment of 23 assault weapons, more than 50 pounds of explosives, 1,600 rounds of ammunition, a bloody axe, a shovel, a tarp, a corpse, a bale of weed, several kilos of cocaine, bags of opioids, OxyContin, and a missing child kidnapped along the way? You get the point. 12 of the firearms had bump stocks, legal accessories for rifles that enable them to be fired more rapidly. Paddock was not new to riding with or transporting all kinds of illicit contraband. He's been doing it for quite some time. He was not new to committing criminal acts. He wasn't worried about getting caught. He knew there would be no interference from federal agents, traffic cops, or security guards during the planning, purchase, transport, baggage check-in, setup, and final attack on innocent concert-goers. The question is, does privilege exempt certain outlaws from surveillance, scrutiny, wiretaps, profiling, nuisance traffic stops, stop and frisk, excessive searches, misdemeanor and felony charges, arrests, and suspicion. Was this crime preventable? Absolutely. Are police and the justice system ready to extend the same treatment to privileged white males that's given to blacks and other minorities? Absolutely not. Will these crimes continue to increase in frequency and intensity? Absolutely yes. Will the feds and the local cops continue to extend privileges and courtesies to these criminal deviants? Sadly, they will. The problem isn't these shooters. The problem is the over-policing and injustice targeting one group of Americans versus the courtesies offered another group who have unfettered access to greater weapons of mass civilian destruction. Over-policing minorities is also the reason black males are less likely to be selected as patsies for large false flags, because they would be a greater liability to the success of these kinds of missions, and because of the greater probability they will be stopped by cops for something totally unrelated to the mission. In the case of the Las Vegas shooter, a long line of federal agents and local cops accepted Paddock as one of the boys. Paddock has never met a federal agent or cop he didn't like. All cops are helpful, polite and eager to go out of their way to avoid inconveniencing him in any way. There are many more Paddocks out there right now planning, purchasing, transporting and setting up for their next mass shooting. America is also defenseless against the destructive mass thefts of the privileged Madoffs, Stanfords, Carviles and Ebers, whose massive crimes have also ruined and destroyed many lives. So either this system of majority privilege and perks is fatally flawed, or the feds and local cops have some serious explaining to do. But don't wait for it. Access to that information is highly classified and accessible only by a privileged few. From useful fool to patsy. At some point, Stephen Paddock had to think it was too good to be true. CNN headline: Vegas killer paid cash for property and privacy. He seemed so ordinary, just another house-hunting retiree, when he strolled with his girlfriend into the sales office of the Sun City development in late 2014. The agents had just what Stephen Craig Paddock was looking for. What agents? Could they be federal agents assigned to the Stephen Paddock case to assist and monitor him? The agents had just what Stephen Craig Paddock was looking for, a 2,000 square foot, two-bedroom stucco rambler on a cul-de-sac. Other houses might offer bigger floor plans, but the one on Babbling Brook Court had two big selling points: a commanding hilltop view and, perhaps most importantly, privacy. Neighbors lived to the left and right, but none behind the home. Paddock quickly said he'd take it. He stood about 6'4", but came across as low-key and relaxed. A good guy, one of the real estate agents recalled, speaking on condition of anonymity. One of the federal agents posing as real estate agents recalled, speaking on condition of anonymity so as not to blow their carefully established cover. Please note: we prefer that comments also include a response to any one of the following questions. Which one of the following answers best describes where you live or work? Rural, suburb or urban? Which best describes the local job market? Vibrant, growing, slowing, neutral, dying or dead? How would you rate the job performance of your mayor, city council and police chief? What do you think about the idea of elected officials' term limits being limited to previous years served in the military? What do you think about the idea of immigrant citizenship being tied to military service, other humanitarian service corps, or disaster response corps? Do you believe the U.S. military today is more battle-ready than North Korea and China? Should the president, media, and other national and local leaders be preparing the American people for the worst if war breaks out or terrorist attacks increase? Should Wall Street investors be concerned at all about probable war, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and shrinking families? Since no justice system will be perfect, answer this final question. What would be an acceptable cost? 10 men are charged, all 10 plead innocent, but anywhere from 1 to 9 men are guilty, and there is no way to know who the innocent men are. How many men should be acquitted to give the innocent men a chance to go free?